Hello again, Gary Stearman, and with me once again, as promised, is Avi Lipkin. Avi, let's take up our conversation where we left off before. We were talking about events in the Middle East, and we had talked about Syria, we had talked about ISIS, or ISIL, as some people say. But let's talk for a moment now about Russia's influence, and let's talk about the Kurds. And let's talk about some of the other ethnic groups in the area who are being really badly treated these days.
Okay, in my book, my most recent book, Islamic Rivalry, I include in chapter 2 of my book, my first chapter is about American policy blunders. Mm-hmm. The second chapter is about Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and the Turks. And this sets the stage for the Russian situation today. Now, what I try to do when I write my books is look through the eyes of these different groups, how they see America, how they see the situation in the Middle East. Mm-hmm. Now, the Russians, kind of like the Americans, 200 years ago, they had something called manifest destiny also. Mm. The Americans pushed to the west, to California, to the Pacific. The Russians pushed to the east, to the Pacific. On their march to the east, over a period of centuries, they confronted Islamic nations, including Tatars, who are Turks, Chechens, who are Turks, and Circassians, who are Turks. I don't know if you know this or not, but in Israel, in the Israeli army, we have officers and soldiers who are Circassians. They're not Arabs, they're Turks. Hmm. And they were stationed in the Holy Land by the Turkish Sultan, the Turkish Empire, 200 years ago, mm-hmm. Because the Soviets, the Tsars of Russia were fighting them. And the Tsar of Russia in 1854, according to the Circassians, the Russian army massacred, Holocaust style, 3 million Circassian Turks. Hmm. And so those who could escape and escaped into Turkey were then sent down to the land of Israel to be part of the Turkish army because they were professional soldiers, the Circassians. So we have Circassian soldiers and officers in the Israeli army. They're Sunni Muslims, and they hate the Russians. Hmm. Now, you remember the Sochi Olympics in the winter, and Sochi is a very nice Russian town and everything, but Sochi was the heart of the Circassian Empire, which was part of the Turkish Empire, the tribes. And so the Circassians do not forgive and forget the Russians. The Tatars were in Crimea. You heard about Crimea and this whole situation. That's why I connect this all with the situation with Ukraine. Because the Ukrainians are Catholics. They are supported by the Turks because the Turks are against the Russians. So the Tatars were expelled from Crimea by Stalin in World War II. And now what's happening is the Tatars are returning to their ancestral homeland. Okay, now the Chechens, as you all know, the bombers in Boston marathon bombing, they were Chechens.
Sure.
Russia warned the United States, but of course there are so many Muslims in Homeland Security now that was ignored. So the Chechens are enemies of Russia. They're enemies of America. They're fanatic Muslim terrorists fighting for what they believe in. So you have the Tatars, the Chechens, Circassians, who are all around the Black Sea. The Black Sea was the Ottoman Empire. The Ukrainians moved down and conquered them. Actually, the Russians moved down and conquered them. And when Ukraine breaks away, the Turks align themselves with Ukrainians who are seen as enemies of Russia.
Now, in the American newspapers, what we read about is Russia moving to the west through Ukraine, and that's pretty much it. Just that's that one fact that Russia would like to move westward through Ukraine. But there's much behind this. In other words, much history behind it.
Correct. And the enemy of my enemy is my ally. Therefore, the Russians have aligned themselves with Iran. Because Iran is Shiite. Okay, so the Iranian Shiites are enemies of the Turkish Sunnis. This is very important. Because we're going to see things happening in Turkey very soon.
That's why there is a mutual defense pact between Russia and Iran.
Yes, this goes back 200 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I have to tell you a little story. I'm forming a Judeo-Christian political party to run for the Knesset elections.
Yes.
It's in my 4th book, the Blue Book. I'm running for office. I'm the Jewish Huckabee, okay? And so anyway, part of my work is to rub shoulders with different types of Christians in Israel and to campaign. I'm already campaigning. And I went down to the old city, into the old city to the Christian quarter. and I met with 6 different Christian Arab businessmen. And when we were sitting all together and the door was closed and nobody was listening, I said, tell me something. Why is it that Vladimir Putin is the defender of the Christians? And America today is going against the Christians. America is supporting the Holocaust of Christians. So, and they said to me like this, what you have today in Syria is Bashar al-Assad, who's losing. Bashar al-Assad is losing. But he and his Alawites were 10% of Syria. Christians were 10%. And the Druze and the Kurds and the Yazidis, all these different groups, basically altogether was like 20% against 80% of the population, which is Sunni. So Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Egypt, they support the Sunnis, and the U.S. supports the Sunnis. I explain this whole constellation in my book. And the Christians are defended by Bashar al-Assad, who's defended by Iran, who's defended by Russia. Therefore, Russia becomes the defender of the Christians, the defender of the Druze, the defender of the Kurds, the defender of all these different minorities, and actually the defender of Sunnis who are not crazy, like
and
ISIL.
You have mentioned to me that Putin is actually a Czarist. How does that work?
Okay, now, most people watching this show are high-level people, and so most people watching this show know that under the Tsar, until 1917, Russian Orthodox Church was the official religion of Russia. When communism came in 1917, Christianity was banned, and Islam was banned, and Judaism was banned. All the holy places were blown up by Stalin, and anyone who was religious in any way was killed. So all religions were suppressed because all the nations should come together without God.
Sure.
Okay, that's the communist line.
Yeah.
When Putin came to lead Russia, he said, you know what? This communism stuff is crazy. Putin is not a communist. He might have been in the KGB, he might have been a communist in his youth, but he has returned to the glory of Russian Orthodox Christianity being the official religion of Russia. By the way, they also suppressed, the Baptists and all these other non-official state Christianity groups. And actually, Vladimir Putin said that what made Russia great is its Christianity. And he was actually criticizing the U.S. for backsliding, going against Christianity.
Now, there's some news.
Well, it's interesting because he came out of this communist system which suppressed Christianity, and today Christianity is the religion of Russia. So, and he's defending these Christians in the Middle East who are being genocidally holocausted by ISIS. Churches that have been there for almost 2,000 years are being blown up every day by
Absolutely,
ISIL. Yeah. Where is the United States? Where are the churches in
Right.
America? Why isn't anyone talking about it? And I as a Jew, know what a Holocaust is. So I look at these poor Christians. I look at the Yazidis. I look at the Kurds. I look at the Druze. All these groups ostensibly protected by Bashar al-Assad and by Iran and by Russia. And they're being defeated. They're being destroyed by ISIL.
And you're right. Where are the Western Christians when you really need them?
Yeah. Now, a very important point is that the Druze live in many nations. They live in 4 nations primarily: Israel, Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. And in the Six-Day War, Israel conquered the Golan Heights, liberated the Golan Heights, and the Druze remained in the Golan Heights at the behest of their Israeli Druze brethren, saying, nothing bad will happen to you. And the Druze stayed in the Golan Heights, but they refused to become Israeli citizens out of their loyalty to Bashar al-Assad and to his father. Okay, now there is no more Syria. Bashar al-Assad is finished. So now the Druze are flocking, the Druze of the Golan Heights are flocking to get Israeli citizenship. The Golan is already annexed to Israel, but now the Druze across the border in South Syria want Israel to annex the mountain of the Druze because there are 700,000 Druze there surrounded by ISIL, and they're going to be massacred if somebody doesn't protect them.
Now, I, as a Christian of the Western Hemisphere, feel totally isolated from this. What can I do? I have no connections with any of the Christians in the Middle East. I wouldn't know what to do if somebody asked me for help.
Well, firstly, let me say one thing. There are many, on the internet, there are many, many Christian organizations working with the Christians of the Middle East. And if people want, they can be in touch with me, and I will refer them to the different organizations that are protecting Christians in the Middle East. But my book explains exactly where we are today in the Middle East with all these minority groups.
You've heard the old saying, you can't tell the players without a program. Now, if you're a little confused by all of the facts that Avi has laid out, and you say, where in the world can I read about this? Right here. It's Islamic rivalry. ISIS and Iran are fighting for the heart of Islamic identity. And if you want to really be able to read about this and kind of absorb it over a period of time rather than being force-fed in just a very few minutes, this is the book for you. We have it in our prophecywatchers.com online bookstore. Just click the bookstore, scroll down. You'll find all of Avi's books. We have 6 of them here. The 7th book, Islamic Rivalry, 1995. You can purchase it, and you'll have it in your hands very quickly. Just go to the website, prophecywatchers.com, and, well, you're there now. But let me tell you, if you haven't perused the bookstore, you've got a great surprise coming, because we have a wonderful selection of books. Avi's book is going to really help you to understand what's happening in the Middle East. Avi, we've got 3 or 4 minutes left. Let's sum this all up.
Okay, I believe that the borders of the Middle East are going to change radically very soon. I believe what we're...
Very soon. Let me interrupt you.
Yeah.
When you say very soon, what do you mean?
I mean imminently. I mean, imminent, it can be days, weeks, months, maybe a year or 2.
Okay.
ISIS is moving right now against the Druze in the south of Syria. ISIS is moving to dislodge Bashar al-Assad from Damascus. Mm-hmm. Damascus could be destroyed in a day, with this war going on.
Imminently.
Yeah.
Wow.
At any moment. And Bashar al-Assad very soon probably will be fleeing with his forces to Latakia, to his ancestral home ground, which is on the coast of northwest border of Syria, northwest coast of Syria. And ISIL probably is going to come and take over. Israel is trying to work with Jabhat al-Nusra and Al-Qaeda, which are also terrorist organizations, but they're bitter enemies of ISIL. So it's like, it is very complicated. Syrian borders don't exist anymore. Iraqi borders don't exist anymore. In other words, ISIL straddles the border between Syria and Iraq. And they're moving south towards Jordan and Israel. Jordan and Saudi.
What will happen to Jordan?
And like I said before, I believe that the king is in grave danger, King Abdullah. I wish him well, but he's in grave danger. The royal family is in grave danger. Al Jazeera came out with a poll. Tens of thousands of people participated. 82% of the Muslims, Sunni Muslims, support ISIL in the world. 82%. 92% in Saudi Arabia support ISIL. So the king of Saudi Arabia is also finished. It's only a question of time. It's imminent before the king of Saudi Arabia falls. Now, we talked months ago about the Houthis coming up from Yemen, and I know you can use this as a resource again. Look at the map. The Houthis are getting closer and closer to Mecca and Medina and to the Saudi missile base. They're backed by Iran. Iran is to the east of Saudi Arabia, but they could easily invade from the east. ISIL is to the north. Egypt will send in troops from the west. It's the perfect storm. They're coming in. All these nations and all these armies are going to all meet in Saudi Arabia. So I predict the imminent collapse of Jordan and Saudi Arabia under ISIL.
And with that, we're out of time. We need to spend at least one more session on this, and I'm going to ask you back again because we've opened up several cans of worms here, and we need to deal with. I'd like to talk more about the Houthis because you mentioned this on one of our earlier updates long before anyone else was talking about the Houthis, and lo and behold, they're growing in strength. So join us again, and by the way, order the book, 1995, right there on the online bookstore. It's called Islamic Rivalry. And Avi writes very factually, easy to understand, tons of information. Come back and let's talk one more time. Avi Lipkin. I'm Gary Stearman. Hey, we're watching. You keep watching, too. Thanks for joining us on Prophecy Watchers. You can find us on the web at prophecywatchers.com, where you can sign up for our free email newsletter, or follow us at facebook.com/prophecywatchers. In the meantime, keep watching, everybody, and we'll see you soon.